Our favorite professor, George Szamuely from Hungary, is here to talk about that and other stories, and I'm very glad to welcome him. George, Dr. George, thank you for joining us. Am I right in that prediction that the war is coming to an end and soon our leaders will be, at least on the face of it, wondering what we're talking about when we raise the issue of the great economic war we in Europe launched against Russia, only to have it turned into a very large boomerang that came back and hit us in the face?
Well, it would be nice to think that you are right. I don't know. The Americans and the NATO gang in Europe will find it very hard to admit defeat. They are going to do their damnedest to continue this war for as long as possible, because as far as they are concerned, this is a good deal for them. It keeps the American military-industrial complex humming. It's relatively low on casualties as far as the United States is concerned. In fact, it has zero casualties as far as the United States is concerned. And when they look upon this war, they say, well, okay, we've got Ukrainians dying, but they don't care very much about that. We've got Russians dying. That brings them pleasure, as Senator Lindsey Graham said ecstatically. So they will want to keep it going for as long as possible to kill as many Slavs as possible. So that's why the longer this war goes on, then, you know, the fewer Slavs there are to worry about. So I'd like to think that this war is coming to an end, but I wouldn't put it past the Americans just to keep it going for that much longer.
Well, that would require the Ukrainians to keep on fighting and dying, of course. And there are ample signs. Just today, an Air Force commander flew his $100 million fighter jet given by the American taxpayer. He flew it to Russia and surrendered it, and himself. The number of people surrendering on the battlefield is increasing. The inability to replace the fallen with new conscripts is drying up. Anyone with money has already fled Ukraine in order to avoid their military duty, and the inner circle is showing signs of tiring with Zelensky.
That's true. All of that is true. But the extraordinary thing is that Ukraine has kept this war going for as long as it has, because, you know, as you said earlier, there was no way Ukraine could ever win this war. That was just, the numbers never made any sense. I mean, Russia's 4 times the size. Russia, unlike Ukraine, has a military industry, you know, Russia is a strong, self-reliant economy. You would have thought, and I guess this is probably what the Russian leaders were thinking back in February of last year, that Ukraine will realize what a foolish enterprise this is to wage a war that Ukraine cannot win. But for some reason, Ukraine has foolishly continued fighting. So it may well be that Ukraine is on its last legs. At some point, it will have to be on its last legs. But I always want to just be a little bit cautious. They're still able to put some men into the field. So I wouldn't be surprised if it'll go on for at least a little while longer.
George, turning a little, though the same elements are involved, the European Union's leaders, luckily for them, the EU leaders themselves don't have to be elected by anyone. I shudder to think what von der Leyen would poll in a European-wide poll, or even Borrell. They don't have to be elected. They are appointed and give themselves plenipotentiary powers. I mean, von der Leyen, on the face of it, has no say over European Union foreign policy, although she's all the while making it ex cathedra wherever she goes or turns her attention to. But the the elected European leaders, I'm in Berlin, Schulz is on 12%. 12. And he's the Chancellor of Germany. His bonkers Baerbock riding partner, the Green leader, is sitting on only a tiny bit more. The British government of Rishi Sunak, I mean, again, it's almost laughable, the parlous state of Western European governments, but they plough on regardless, don't they? In defiance now of their own people, of, for example, a ceasefire in Gaza. Why? How?
It's quite striking. I don't remember any time in recent history when there's been such a disjunction between popular opinion and the opinion of political elites. And that's true in the United States, and it's true in Europe. Both in the United States and in Europe, they want the wars in Ukraine and the war in Gaza to come to an end. There's an overwhelming support for a ceasefire in Gaza. And yet, when it comes to a vote in Congress, something like 96, 97% of the members of Congress, and then both the House and the Senate, will vote for no ceasefire. At best, a humanitarian pause, which is a kind of a complete oxymoron. And the same goes in Europe. I mean, you never see any anti-Russian demonstration. You never see a demonstration in favor of Zelensky. The Europeans and the Americans think this is a crazy idea. The war should have come to an end. But that's not the view of von der Leyen. It's not the view of Sergeant Schulz and Baerbock and Rishi Sunak and Boris Johnson and Liz Truss and the rest of the gang. They want to keep the war going. Then you have to think, well, there's something in it for them. There's money, there's prestige, there are all kinds of academic gigs when they leave office, seats on various boards. That's what they care about. And the public says, let's bring both of these wars to an end, and let's bring, especially in Europe, let's bring these nutty economic sanctions to an end.
Yes, these sanctions are now going to bite us big time over what is expected to be a very cold winter, George. I explained the economic situation in Germany as best I could in a moment. The situation on the street in Germany, it looks really dire, I must tell you. The people are miserable. There's no heating on anywhere, even in department stores it's cold. The people can't afford the vast hike in energy costs that they have suffered as a result of these sanctions and the blowing up of the pipeline. And of course, it was famously said, if Germany catches cold, the rest of the economies in Europe will get influenza or worse. How are we going to cope with this?
Well, we can't. The key to European success since 1945 has been German economic success. Germany used to be very good at fighting wars. It's forgotten how to do that, but it's been very good at creating a very productive economy, the Wirtschaftswunder. That's been its pride and joy. I mean, it's boasted about this for the past near 80 years. That's gone. I mean, with the destruction of the Nord Stream pipelines, they just don't have any source of cheap energy anymore. If they don't have any source of cheap energy, they're not going to be able to maintain their fantastic industries, all those cars and consumer appliances and pharmaceuticals and chemicals, all the things that gave German industry this enormous global reputation. They're all going to go. So it's not just people are going to be miserable because they don't have any heating in their homes. They're just not going to have a productive economy any longer. And the Americans are very happy. I mean, that's exactly what they wanted. They just want to remove all rivals from the scene. What's baffling about it is why have the Germans allowed themselves to be put in this position. I mean, the Germans would surely have understood that this is what the Americans want. The Americans want you out of the way and cease to be a competitor to them. I mean, Trump at least made that explicit. But with Biden, I mean, it's been obvious. I mean, we had that humiliating scene where Sergeant Schultz was standing there next to Biden, and Biden said, "We are going to end the Nord Stream pipelines." And when he was asked, "Well, how are you going to do that?" he said, "Well, don't worry, we're going to do it." And Schultz said nothing, just sat, stood there like a dummy. I mean, can you imagine any German chancellor being humiliated in public like this? He's holding the office that Bismarck held. And that's or Willy Brandt or Helmut Schmidt or more recent times. That's Germany today.
Now, turning finally to San Francisco, George, winners, losers, did anything useful come out of it? It was a PR victory for China, but I'm not sure that America's policy has changed towards them.
No, I don't think it has. I think Biden made clear, with his dictator comment, basically, that he's still sticking with his mindless division of the world between democracies and autocracies. He basically, the United States has really very little to contribute to the world. But I agreed with your opening editorial. China has yet to pull its weight in the world. I mean, it's a problem when Russia is doing all the heavy lifting on many different issues, and China, at best kind of follows along. But China is a huge economic power. It's obviously an enormous country. It has to, to step up, and it has to provide an alternative model for the rest of the world. You can't just expect always Russia to be in the forefront. So, he comes there and he wants good peace, good relations with the United States. And then, he gets all these the top 400 corporate leaders in the United States, are given a standing ovation. I mean, what do they want? They just simply want to go to China and make a lot of money. It's just a source of cheap labor for them. And, China has to be a little bit more than that. Can't just go on essentially providing, U.S. corporate titans with a source of cheap labor. So, either it's going to be a kind of the pole of a new world order, or it's just going to be an appendage of the United States.
Thank you very much, as always, Dr. George Szamuely from Budapest, and the Senior Research Fellow at the Global Policy Institute. Always a pleasure.